What happens when one of Britain's loudest voices faces the silence of a courtroom? Russell Brand, the wild-haired, quick-tongued comedian who once ruled radio, film, and fame itself, is now standing trial for the most serious accusations of his life. In 2025, the man who built an empire on charm and chaos found himself accused of rape and multiple counts of sexual assault. This story isn't just about a celebrity scandal. It's about power, accountability, and a fall from grace that few could have imagined. And by the end, one question lingers. How did the king of controversy become the center of a criminal case that could redefine his legacy forever? The shock came in April 2025. The Crown Prosecution Service charged Russell Brand with 1 count of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 1 count of oral rape, and 2 counts of sexual assault, all tied to 4 separate women. The alleged crimes stretch back to the years between 1999 and 2005, when Brand's career was rising fast, when he was the face of wild British comedy, when parties blurred into performances and chaos was his signature. The locations were London and Bournemouth, the same cities that fueled his fame. Prosecutors claim they were also the backdrop for crimes that fame helped hide. On May 30, 2025, in Southwark Crown Court, Brand entered the room not as a comedian or a political firebrand, but as a defendant. Cameras waited outside, reporters filled the corridors, fans stood behind barriers holding signs that read, "Justice" or "Set up." Inside, he spoke just 2 words: not guilty. No jokes, no grin, no showmanship. Only a man facing the weight of 5 serious charges. For a performer who once thrived on sound and laughter, the silence of that courtroom was deafening. Years before any of this, the signs of volatility were already there. Brand was expelled from drama school for erratic behavior and drug use. He bounced from small clubs to rehab centers, collecting chaos like trophies. Every fall only made him louder. Every scandal only drew more eyes. It was as if self-destruction had become part of the act. So how did all this come to light after decades of silence? The spark came from a media investigation that refused to look away. In 2023, journalists at the Sunday Times and Channel 4's Dispatches spent months verifying allegations from several women who said Brand had assaulted them. When the story broke, the impact was seismic. The nation split down the middle, half horrified, half skeptical. Within hours, London's Metropolitan Police announced they were assessing the claims. Within days, new witnesses had come forward, and within 2 years the case had evolved into a criminal prosecution. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A man who made his name oversharing every part of his life was now accused of hiding its darkest corners. Brand had always called himself an open book. Now investigators were reading the pages he'd never meant to publish. But Russell Brand was no stranger to controversy. He'd been playing with fire for years. In 2001, he was fired from MTV after showing up to work dressed as Osama bin Laden, just 1 day after 9/11. He called it satire. The network called it offensive. Either way, it was a snapshot of who he was back then. Reckless, boundaryless, addicted to attention. It was the same unpredictability that made him a household name, and later, a target. When the allegations surfaced, Brand didn't retreat. He responded in his usual way, publicly and dramatically. In a video posted to millions of followers, he denied all accusations, calling them very, very serious criminal allegations that I absolutely refute. He admitted he'd been promiscuous, describing himself as a sex addict and an imbecile, but said every relationship he'd had was consensual. To him, this wasn't justice. It was character assassination. But the court saw it differently. At 49, Brand was no longer the brash young comic the world once knew. He'd reinvented himself as a spiritual commentator, a man of peace, compassion, and mindfulness. He spoke about recovery, meditation, and purpose. Yet the prosecution painted a more troubling picture, that behind the Enlightenment was the same need for control, the same hunger for dominance, just dressed in softer language. When he walked out of court on conditional bail, the world was watching. The fans who once cheered him now argued online, some insisting on his innocence, others demanding accountability. The tabloids called it the trial of a generation. But beneath the headlines, the reality was colder. Russell Brand wasn't facing gossip anymore. He was facing prison. At the height of his fame, his life had looked untouchable. He'd married global pop icon Katy Perry in India. A wedding straight out of a dream, with elephants, fire dancers, and monks chanting under the stars. Cameras captured every smile, every kiss, every vow. 14 months later, he ended it all with a single text. For a man who claimed to seek love and truth, he left wreckage wherever he went. Even his most personal moments felt scripted, as though he never stopped performing. Now, decades later, the curtain is up again. The official trial begins on June 3, 2026, expected to last 4 to 5 weeks. Inside Southwark Crown Court, 4 women will testify. Each has a different story, different year, different setting. But one shared accusation: that Brand's charm wasn't harmless, that it masked something manipulative, even dangerous. Prosecutors will argue that his fame allowed him to blur boundaries, that people laughed off his behavior because that's just Russell. His defense will counter that the encounters were consensual, that memories fade, and that media attention has poisoned the jury pool before the first witness even speaks. Outside, the world is already writing its own ending. The same networks that once booked him now dissect his downfall. Old clips resurface, colleagues speak out. Some call him a predator. Others say the media's rewriting history. Each headline erases a little more of his legacy. Brand once preached rebirth, meditation, service, recovery. He quoted Sanskrit, wrote about compassion, even tattooed one god on his arm. But now he stands before a judge, accused of betraying the respect he claimed to live by. Redemption stories are powerful, but only if they're true. This trial is bigger than one man. It's a mirror for fame, power, and silence. How many stories like this were ignored because the man telling jokes was too famous to hear no? For British entertainment, it's the end of an era. Shock value no longer sells. And Russell Brand, once the loudest man in the room, now sits in silence while others tell his story. No smirks, no laughter, just a man shrinking under the weight of testimony. Because fame doesn't echo in a courtroom. Only truth does. Whatever the verdict, one thing's clear: Russell Brand's story won't return to comedy. The man who turned pain into punchlines has run out of material. In the end, this isn't about jokes or fame. It's about accountability. When the verdict comes, it won't just decide his fate, but whether redemption has limits, or if even the wildest star can rise again after the fall. If this story kept you watching, tap like, hit subscribe, and share it. More stories of fame, fall, and reckoning coming soon.